Good afternoon. Welcome back to another rendition of the B Nature virtual event space. You are tuned in to a live post-processing session with Sony Artisan of Imagery, freshly back from the Sony condo trip. Mike Colón. Mike, what's going on, man?
What's up, Derek? Dude, you know what I just realized? I didn't do the mustache thing, but you
I
didn't shave your beard either. So
I was praying. I'm like, I hope he doesn't come on with the Magnum PI mustache because I got
I
the full
was
beard over here.
okay. I was glad at least you had the full beard, but you're more burly than me. I had to shave it for a shoot, and I was like, dang it! I was planning on doing the. I actually I should have the photo, but I took a picture of myself. I shaved down here and like left a big fat mustache for you. I'll send that to you later, though.
Yeah, you got to send that to me. I would end up a dead man if my wife saw me with that mustache. And I know Scott's loving right now that we didn't go through with it, but we'll have to push it back. Maybe 2023 is the year we get it done.
I'm down. I'm down. Well, it is
Awesome.
Movember coming up, so maybe we should do it for
I got a
November.
head start. Maybe I'll,
Yeah,
yeah, you
yeah.
know what? There we go. We'll see if we can make November happen this year. So, dude, I'm every time when a year when you guys get back from condo, everyone else in the world is jealous that you guys are out there just living it up, having a great time, talented group of photographers, just hanging out. And this time, Idaho, right?
Yeah, yeah, Sun Valley, Idaho. Yeah, it was amazing. The weather was awesome. Just it's like a family reunion. Every time I go out there, it's like I'm seeing family again and hanging out. And especially since COVID and all that, we haven't done it in like 2 years. We did like an online Zoom version, but it's like Zoom's never the same as
It's
hanging
not
out in
the
person.
same.
But yeah, it was like old times. Giving everyone hugs and hanging out and lots of laughs and just creative juices flowing, everyone talking and super pumped and excited about just the gear and the models and the photo sets that we had to shoot and yeah, just catching up. It was fun.
Yeah, it always looks like a great time. It's like major FOMO going on, but we're going to be living
Yeah.
vicariously through you. I know you brought some images back from condo, and we're going to be looking at some of these images today. So I want to send a huge thank you to Mike for doing this and for Sony for sponsoring. So we're keeping it super simple. We're just going to watch Mike go through his processing. And if you guys do have any questions, feel free to jump in. But this is kind of a relaxing, hands-off demo and just kind of watch you work, man.
Yeah, cool. Well, I was excited to go through these images anyways. I kind of kept it raw because I wanted to just think out loud and maybe just show a little bit of the thought process behind the shoot, what I was going for, and then like what worked, what didn't work, and then if I can find an image. I practiced on one image, so I have a little bit of a canned image that I could show you what I did and show you before and after. But I'd like to go through kind of my process of how I edit an image and yeah, and then just talk through the whole thing. So hopefully you get something out of it.
Definitely. All right. We'll turn it over to you, Mike. And as I said, any of our viewers, if you guys have any questions, feel free to get them in.
Yeah, cool. So I'm going to share my Capture One. I've been editing on Capture One. So I imported last night and just dumped the cards to my hard drive, and this would be like the first thing I see looking through my images. I shot a lot. I shot like a few different sets, a few different models, and it's always a challenge when you're shooting with a group of photographers. Everyone's kind of trying to get a shot, and you have videographers, and Sony invites the collective as well, and some of them are like YouTubers and influencers. So some of them are shooting on their phones, and it's just kind of crazy, chaotic time, but it's fun still. Everyone's really friendly and lets each other shoot. And like I remember I walked up and I said, "Can I steal the model away for a second?" And we're all like giving each other a hard time. But I'm if I'm going to shoot, I want to try to get something at least that's my own, or at least my own idea, and not just what everyone else is shooting. So I pulled a model like this one, for example. I pulled her in front of the Airstream. I think this was planned out by the stylist. The outfit was kind of had a shiny look to it, and the Airstream was shiny. So this wasn't the best time of day to shoot in. This was like the sun was setting, but it didn't quite get to that soft light. But I still thought the lighting was decent, a little bit harsh, but still at the right angle. But I opted for like a 135 lens. That way I can really just kind of like shoot wide open, blur the background, separate her from the background a little bit, but have the Airstream framing her. And I was hoping that the shallow depth of field would also soften the skin tones a bit. Um, so looking through these images, like there's some issues, you know, like obviously my composition isn't perfect, so that can all be fixed in post. I'm looking at her hair, and you know, when I flip through on Capture One, there's a slight delay built. These are high res photos, like 50 megapixels, so it takes a second to snap in sharp. But a lot of times I'm just kind of flipping through, looking for hair, like the hair and the body position. I'll flip through kind of fast, and something that stands out to me, like this image, I kind of like. I like the profile of her and just her position, and she's kind of enjoying the sun hitting her. Um, so if I was just to go in on this image and do a couple things. I don't know, like first off, I would straighten it, and let me move this zoom window over here. Okay, so on the crop tool, actually the straighten tool here, you can do rotate freehand, or you can draw a line. So if you just want to pick like straighten, like the standard straighten tool, you could draw a line on something that you think needs to be straight in the image, like that little line below the Airstream, like the awning might need to be straight. But then if it still doesn't, I mean, that looks pretty good, but if it doesn't look right, you can just go freehand and just kind of like adjust until it feels right. But I'm also looking at the grid and kind of lining up the background horizon lines, you know, like the bumper down below or the awning, and trying to find something in the middle. If I want to get perfectionistic about it, sometimes I'll run down to keystone right here on the bottom right, and I usually use these sliders, and you could go like guides, and you can actually, like, you know, pick 4 corners that you think need to be straightened out, and you can drag these around. But like on an image like this, it's kind of hard to see. If you don't have something square in the background that is supposed to be square, it's kind of hard to mess with this. And you can try it and hit apply and see what it looks like. Now, when you're doing any kind of keystoning, you got to be careful not to stretch important things on the body and make things look weird or off. I don't like to do it too much, but you can get an idea of what that looks like. But over here on this, if I just undo that, reset that, on the sliders, like say I notice I need to just horizontal, like kind of adjust to get, and I just look at the grids and try to line things up a little bit. So I'm kind of a perfectionist when it comes to the background lines. I feel like things need to frame and complement the model and bring your attention to the model and not distract. You know, obviously if you're like shooting creatively and shooting at an angle, a tilt is fine, but if it's slightly off, like it looks like it was unintentional, or horizon line or any kind of like hard line in the background, if it's off, I try to straighten that perfectly. And I think I got that from shooting runway, like a designer that I worked for wants every single line in the background like super perfect. So I got into editing like that, and then it just kind of rubbed off on me. Now I'm super picky about that stuff too, which I don't know if that's good or bad. It takes a lot of my time, but you know, it doesn't hurt to have your lines in the background look good. So and when it comes to crop, like composition, sometimes I'll change the format. Like on the crop tool, you can come up and change it from original, which is like how you shot it, 2:3 ratio. Sometimes if I feel like there's just unneeded space, like down here, her knee was showing, and so 5:7 actually to me looks a little better. So you know, it's okay to crop a different format for most of my work. And nowadays with the way I present through a gallery, I can crop any dimension. I can crop square, I can crop like, you know, any size, any aspect ratio, and I can still present it to my client like that. Obviously, if the client is needing a certain format, I'll send it to them like that. But I like to crop for the image, and that way the presentation might have a little variety in crop and things like that. If someone was printing, that might get a little confusing, but nowadays with the technology and printing, if someone wanted to make a print, they could see the crop right there on the computer and adjust it for the proper composition if they needed to print for a frame that was a different aspect ratio or something like that. So I don't worry. The point is, I don't worry too much about aspect ratio. I'll even go freehand sometimes, just go unconstrained, and then just kind of like dial in where I think the image should be. Maybe I want to show where the dress ends, so you can see it's like the style of the gown. And then I'm looking at rule of thirds. I'm looking at where those white lines meet up, and just trying to put my subject in that rule of thirds. And and then I'll just take a look at it and see how it looks. And that looks pretty good. I'm gonna again straighten just a little more. I think this line is the most dominant line in the image, so I'm gonna just adjust that and go from there. So next I'll kind of come up here to let me go back to the top. Let me move the zoom thing again. So layers. So sometimes an image might need like a gradient. Like if the light's distracting, like down here on it's nothing really stands out to me as needing a gradient in this image, but I'll just show you. Maybe I'll show you on the next image. But if like say that her dress right here is too bright and I wanted to tone that down, I could maybe mess with the highlight slider because I noticed that's a highlight. And I could just drag this highlight slider down and you'll see the bright spot of this dress come down a bit, but then that also adjusts the face. And I might want to leave the highlights in her face. So if I'm just trying to grab like just her dress here, I'll use a gradient. And the way Capture One is set up traditionally, I think, well actually, I'm not sure. I use the workspace migration because I came from another software and that seems to be the closest to what I was used to before. But on the workspace, I think Capture One sets us up in the order that they prefer you to do it, or the order that most people do it. And there's an intention behind that, because what I try to do is I try to get the image like somewhat even. Like if there's hot spots in the image or needs a gradient, I will do that first. So there's layers and brushes that you can use first. So say I was to use a gradient, I'll select the little gradient tool here, and say I wanted to darken the dress, I'll drag the gradient up just kind of where I think I want to darken. Then I can mess with the exposure just of that area. See, I'm darkening down below. And again, everything I try to do is very subtle. I try to make my images look very natural. So I'll just tone that down a bit. I might drag the highlights just on that area where the gradient is. I think that's probably the best option. So I bring back the highlights on her dress down there by her hips. And you'll see that as I drag it down, the detail comes back here. It's not as shiny. I think the subject of the image is her face, her expression, kind of her mood. And the dress here is kind of like secondary, you know, like, yeah, it's a cool dress and you want to see the detail, but you don't want your eyes going to the brightest spot, which is her dress. So the brightest spot I want to be kind of up here and surrounding her face and her mood. So that gradient helps just to select that area of the image, and then I can mess with the sliders just on a portion of the image. So what I'm trying to do first off is just getting the image at like an even, nothing distracting, kind of balance across the whole image, and then I can go ahead and like work on the background as its own, you know, layer, and then I can make adjustments in color and density, exposure, and contrast and things without like mess. Like you're starting with more like an even image. So I'll work my way down from layers. The next one is style brushes, and you could come in and like say you just want to I don't know, like warm up a certain area of the image. You could take a brush and just warm up a specific area. Say I wanted the airstream to look warmer, I can paint around and selectively warm up the airstream if I wanted it to be like a warmer for some reason. I don't know, that's just an example, but I'm gonna undo that. But yeah, these brushes, you can selectively correct things with different you know, tools here. I don't use this a lot, but sometimes an image needs it, and if I don't want to go into Photoshop and I just want to do something quicker in Capture One, I'll go ahead and use the brushes there. White balance is next, and usually what I do for white balance, if it looks pretty close, I don't get crazy, but obviously I want the skin tones to look good. So the little dropper tool that picks a neutral, this is a white balance tool, so whatever you click on that should be neutral in the image. Maybe the airstream should be neutral, but from my memory, the airstream I think has a bit of warmth. It's aluminum, so it's not perfectly neutral, but I'll click on the airstream. It looks a little like, on my monitor, it looks a little tan here. And honestly, I don't always trust my monitor. I think like it all depends on the light in the room, the way my eyes are adjusted, what lamp I have on. So that's why I say like I don't get crazy with this stuff, because I'll end up looking at it on another device later, or I'll look at it on the gallery later, or I'll look at it in different lighting and I'll be like, whoa, my skin tones are off. So like this, you could just drive yourself nuts trying to get skin tones perfect, but I try to like I do try to look at them on a few different devices, especially the iPhone, because I feel like most people look at these images through Instagram or through their iPhone, and I want the skin tones to look good for that. So if I click on this Airstream right now, see how it cooled, everything got cooler. Um, this little before and after thing on the top left, I like to just kind of like turn that on and off sometimes, and I can see before and after. So personally, I like the warmer one better, at least on my monitor. Your monitor might show that my correction was true, but I like the warmer one better. So I'm gonna go ahead and undo that. But say I was to click on that, I could also pick a different area, an area that looks cooler to begin with, and just do a minor adjustment. But honestly, like I'm in a neutral office with natural daylight coming through, and so I feel like I can trust what my monitor sees, and I kind of like the way it is already. But yeah, if you find something neutral that should be neutral in the image, and you know for a fact that should be neutral, and you're going for like a clean, neutral, perfect skin tone, you can use this dropper to click on that and then see what happens. Sometimes you click around and you're like, yeah, and then you just do what looks right. I personally tend to like an image in the sun like this. She's getting hit with direct sun. I tend to want something looking a little warmer. And you know, whenever I'm shooting models, unless it's like a cold scene that I'm specifically trying to make it look like more like evening, or there's a reason why I want it to look cool, I typically like skin tones to look a little bit on the warm side. So, and I'll show you on another image like what I get into with if I want skin tones to look a specific way. So now I'm looking at it, is there any distractions? So I kind of take a step back and ask myself, are there any distractions in the image? Anything that's really standing out to me? This image, I don't know, it's pretty clean. I feel like, again, the composition could be a little better. I feel like maybe cutting off a little bit of the Airstream here on the right. Since I didn't nail it perfectly symmetrically, I'm going to go for a little bit more of the rule of thirds here and kind of put her not so centered and bullseyed in the image. I feel like a comfortable composition, if the attention is on her face, would be more here. So I might try that, but I feel like I'm losing the short skirt, and so you can't really see the outfit. And then the dress becomes a leading line off of the image. So I think I'm going to go back, because I feel like framing the skirt kind of keeps her, you know, in the image versus leading me off of the image with her dress. So for the same reason I don't like cropping hands. I don't like you know, anything kind of like leading me off of the frame. Sometimes I don't like cropping the dress, and I shoot a lot of gowns and fashion, so I've learned that, like, if the dress is kind of the centerpiece, you just don't try not to crop it, you know. Yeah, so in my mind, there's not too much more I can do to this image. Maybe this little thing below her arm is a little distracting. I might go in and retouch her. Like, let me show you what I would do, like, if I was gonna fix like her armpit, you know, there's a little razor burn there, so I would go in and kind of fix that. I can use the brush tool or the spot tool in Capture One to like just try to do it, but I typically will take a round trip into Photoshop for this kind of work and use the healing brushes and the spot healing brush, because I found that Capture One isn't as efficient for this kind of stuff, isn't as accurate. It gets a little frustrating, but it's improved over the years, and I feel like it's good enough for quick, like taking off a dust spot or taking off a pimple on the face or something like that. It does a pretty good job. Like her hair right here on her jawline, I can go in and just kind of size that. But if anything's larger than the tool allows, it tends to be a little frustrating using the tool, and Photoshop does a better job of it. There's also the brush tool, there's a healing brush here under layers, so I can do a new layer and I can go in, and this is similar to the clone tool in Photoshop. I can select an area and then kind of paste that area over, and it does a fairly good job of blending if I just want to take off a few of these blemishes, or, you know, when it comes to taking off moles or lines in the face or anything like that, I'm really careful and selective with that. I feel like if I see makeup over the mole, I feel like the model didn't want to see the mole. So I feel like it's fair game to then remove a mole. But if the model did not put makeup over her mole, like foundation or anything over the mole, I'll leave it because that's more of a beauty mark in my mind. Like I'll leave it, and she obviously was okay with that mole showing. So I'm at the model's discretion in a way, or at my client's discretion, and I try to be sensitive to, like, uh, she was, God made her, and she's beautiful as she is. So I don't try to like fix something that's natural. If something's a distraction and it's like, oh yeah, like maybe she had a scar and she's self-conscious about it, or like, like maybe she didn't see the tweezer lady or whatever for the eyebrows right before this shoot. I might go in and kind of help her out a little bit with some of these things. Women, just from talking to my wife and hundreds of models, it's like they tend to like always ask for the lines on their face to be removed, like crow's feet, anything that would be revealing age. And I'm of the mentality of like, man, just like embrace your age and age gracefully, and work on your character. But again, we're talking about a visual photo shoot. So and also, I don't want anyone to be self-conscious or not like an image for some dumb reason because they're like, oh, I could see the lines on my face. And to be honest, like the cameras at the high megapixels are so revealing in lines. I don't even like seeing a photo myself. I even just this camera on me, I was looking at like the way the light was hitting me, and I'm just like, dude, that's so many pores showing in my face. But that's just when you increase the quality of a sensor and add megapixels, you start seeing more. So I'm showing you like a quick like healing brush in Capture One. But I feel like in Photoshop I'm much faster at this kind of stuff. So typically I would take a round trip into Photoshop and do these quicker. So let me just turn this off. And yeah, this image doesn't need too much. I'm going to go to another image and show like this one, for example. Oops. I highlighted a couple that I wanted to show.
Mike, is there one thing that jumps out to you when you're looking through images? Like, is there a certain thing you're looking for or not looking for that makes an image stand out when you're going through?
Yeah, great question. Thanks for bringing that up. So yeah, when I'm looking through like here, let me just get to like another grid of images here so I can kind of think out loud. So that was the one I was going to show. And let me now take off the filter. All right, so whoops. So like Sam, I'm going through my images. Really, like, I mean, for me, it has to do with like, okay, what is the subject of my image? What am I trying to accomplish? What am I trying to communicate with this photo? Am I just showing an outfit? Am I showing a mood? Is it like the beauty of somebody? Is it like I guess I'm just thinking like, what was the intention of this shoot? And I'm also thinking about this during the shoot. I'm trying to accomplish something during the shoot. Like this, for example, like this model here, I remember telling her like, look, I want to see your eyes. I noticed she had like these bright blue eyes and I wanted to showcase them. So I did a portrait of her, and she was kind of sitting there posing for other people. And then I asked her to look at my camera. And just I told her to kind of look through the lens. I feel like models are really good at this, and it's not easy to do this, but to be able to kind of stare into a lens and look completely relaxed and almost like the camera's not there, like you're just looking at a person, or you're just kind of like a blank stare through the lens, that makes people feel there's a reason like models get paid so much, is because they can look at a camera and make the viewer feel comfortable, and that's not easy to do, because if there's any self-consciousness in their eyes, if there's any like their mind is on themselves, you could see it, and it makes the viewer uncomfortable, in my opinion. Like I feel uncomfortable when I'm looking at someone who's self-conscious or someone who's uncomfortable in front of my camera. And so I'm looking for an image that to me stands out as like this. This shows confidence. It shows like I can get into like looking at the model without feeling awkward or feeling like intrusive. So like I feel like this image, for example, I think it was this one. She just had this like stare into the lens and very comfortable and relaxed. I probably would have preferred her mouth closed in this shot, but I felt like her mouth was very relaxed and it was true to who she was and it looked like her. So I noticed some distractions in the image, but I'm like, nothing that I can't fix fairly easily. So this is like the before and after. So I warmed it up and did some cropping. I'll show you what I did, but that's the before and after. So I just kind of cleaned up the image, took out a few things that distracted me, and but I like this image just because it showcased her eyes, and just how blue they are. And then I wasn't cropping anything unnaturally. Like I felt she looked comfortable and relaxed in the image, and the composition felt comfortable to me. The way she was holding her hair was like very relaxed and it just looked natural versus like staged, or she just looked like it just looked like a very comfortable portrait to me. So I gravitated towards it. But yeah, so starting from the beginning, like this was the image. Again, I kind of go through the order of the tools here laid out for me in Capture One, and the first thing would be like the layers tool. So this is the one where I felt like her dress was a little bit bright compared to her face, and instead of just boosting everything, you can see if I just bring the exposure up on everything, the dress kind of blows out. So first I'm going to kind of bring the dress down to a comfortable level where it's all even with her face. I'm not necessarily getting it to a level where it's perfect. I'm getting it to more even with her face. That way I can universally correct the whole image. So I'm going to go ahead and hit a gradient here and just kind of drag up from the bottom. It gives these 3 lines and it kind of shows you where the gradient's going to be. I'll go right up to her chin here, and you could rotate this. You can flip it upside down, whatever you need to do. I'm going to bring the highlights down just a bit here. So you see the dress coming back. I might bring the exposure down just a hair. But I'm trying to I'm blurring my vision a little bit, and I'm looking at the whole image and seeing like this looks too far, like it looks like a strong vignette. This looks pretty even with her face. So I'm just going to kind of do it there. And then the next tool would be white balance. And this one I'll maybe select her hat. It's a neutral black hat, and that gives me, I think a pretty true black hat there. Now I'm noticing that like this part of her arm and her dress looks overdone on that layer. You know what, I didn't use the background, so you got to be careful to make sure you select the background when you do the white balance tool. Otherwise it's just doing white balance on that layer, and that ended up looking pretty distracting. So I'm going to click around her hat until it looks right. I feel like all of these are a little warm, so I'm going to click underneath. Yeah, there's a lot of, it's not good to use black really because it's so dark. It's better to use like a white, but there's nothing really truly white in this image, so I might have to just get something close and then adjust it. So I'm just going to actually go back to the original. I'm going to mess with the slider since I couldn't find really anything to use that would look right. I'm going to warm it up just a bit, and I'm going to pull out I could pull out some green, but I feel like there was green all around her. I remember on the shoot she was sitting in grass, so there's probably a green tint to the image, so I'm going to take out a little bit of that. But I also like to bring the exposure up to the proper level, because sometimes like just bringing the exposure up changes the perception of the color in the image. So bringing the exposure up gets me closer to where the color truly is, and then I can mess with the color. So again, I don't trust my eyes and the room and everything perfectly, so I'm not going to get crazy with it, but I'm just going to get something close and then maybe do an export and look at it on my phone in different light. It is important to try to like, try to be in a neutral environment. It's really important to try to get your office where you're editing somewhere neutral. I notice when I turn on this orange light over here, I have like a daylight balance light in the back that I usually turn on at night when I'm editing, and it's true Kelvin like 5200 or something, and I'll turn that on, and that's the only light in my office, because I noticed if there's any other light, any other tungsten light or colored light in the office, your eyes will filter out that color, and then you think you're seeing accurately, but you've already filtered out this color in your eyes. Your eyes kind of have this auto white balance programmed in, so you will be seeing something different than what you think if you have a light on in the room. So that's really important. So let me go back to the adjustment layer, and I feel like there's too strong of a vignette here on the dress, so I'm going to bring that back up. And then I'm noticing her arm looks a little hot here, so I could just grab another, like basically do another gradient tool and just bring it in here to her arm and tone that down a bit. So it's almost like you're adding a slight vignette there. You could always do this with the vignette tool. And let me just kind of rotate this a little more. All right, so I feel like she looks a little like I want to add some green back in and warm her up a little bit. So right off the bat, I'm noticing some distractions in the image. Oh, let me go into color really quick before I go into Photoshop to start eliminating distractions, because I like to go into Photoshop before I like to use Photoshop to do my more extensive retouching. So before I do that, I got to make sure that the color's as close to what I want as possible, because it ends up becoming like a TIFF file and you lose like the color data and things start changing and shifting. So I try not to mess with color too much after Photoshop. I might do minor tweaks in white balance and things like that to try to match other images, but really I want to make sure my highlights aren't blown out. So I'm going to go on the whole image on the background and just bring my highlights down a little bit. I want to make sure nothing is like I have all the detail. I could always brighten later or brighten in Photoshop, but I don't want anything blown out. I'm going to add a slight vignette here just to bring in the whole corners of everything. I feel like her hand though is getting darker down here too. I could always, mess with that in Photoshop and do some dodging and burning, which I always do anyways. But I want to get the color and the density as close to perfect as possible before I open into Photoshop. And I also like to add film grain, but I do that after I do the round trip out of Photoshop, because then any kind of like healing brush or anything I do on her face, once I save it, I add the film grain afterwards, so it covers up that stuff and there's a nice even film grain across the image, so I'm not like messing with film grain pixels and blurring those out when I'm doing corrections. So I'm going to open this in Photoshop. Actually, let me just, because I could crop and straighten later. So I got the color decent, I got the density decent. Now I'm going to do a round trip into Photoshop. I just go export, I just go edit with Photoshop and usually open it as a PSD. You could do TIFF, but I think PSD's got a little more information for Photoshop in there. So is my screen showing in Photoshop now?
We are still seeing capture one, yeah.
Okay, I'm gonna go to, do I go to new share?
Yeah, try new share out.
Okay, I'm gonna go to Photoshop.
Yeah, because I think it probably just has that window.
All right, can you see Photoshop?
There we go.
Okay, cool. Option close. Okay. So in Photoshop, right off the bat, I'm noticing, like, I'm thinking about what the model told me. She said something about like, can you fix my arms? So I'm remembering things from the shoot. I noticed like right here, like her arms, pushing out a little bit. So Liquify is great for this. You go into filter and Liquify, and this is a great tool for just kind of moving pixels, morphing bodies and dresses and things, anything that's distracting, I try to fix with Liquify here. So I like this push left tool. You can push left or right or up or down depending on which way you move the mouse. If I click and drag down, it kind of will just move things gently to the right. And I'll just kind of shape her arm a little bit here just because I know she was asking for that. And sometimes camera angles, position, body position affects someone's body and how it naturally is, so you can kind of get that back using Liquify. Or some people ask for, like I didn't feel like going on a diet today, so can you hook me up, like I'm bloated today, can you hook me up? And I get a lot of clients asking for that, and a lot of designers asking for funny things. I remember there was a wedding gown designer that asked me to basically stretch all the gowns and make the models look like they're 7 feet tall, and we did it, and it looked very interesting, but it was kind of cartoonish, but it ended up looking kind of cool. So I'm just kind of messing with her arms a bit, and just something subtle and gentle like that is enough for me. There's all kinds of tools. There's like the face tool. I like to point this out because you can actually mess with people's faces and like morph things. Like say like she felt like her face looked a little puffy that day. You can kind of slim up her jawline. You can make her look more puffy. You can make her look like anorexic. But there's all kinds of things that you could do here. I don't usually typically mess with that too much, but I know that women like their jawline to look more chiseled and yeah. So there's you can enlarge eyes, you can shrink or grow noses and mouths, make lips puffier. There's all kinds of fun things you can do in here. Morality wise, I don't know what you want to get into, so I'm gonna leave it subtle and just go with the arm, just that little bulge on the arm. So there's like before and after of her arm. Just a little bit. Oh, I did mess with her face a little bit, not intentionally, but we'll just go with it. And then next thing I would say, I'm noticing right off the bat, this thing by her hand is like a, I don't know, bee flying by or something. So usually this tool here, the spot healing brush, you don't have to select an area, you just click on it and it builds what's underneath from the surrounding area. So I like this tool to quickly go in and fix any blemishes. It's not good for gradients. It's not good for trying to blend gradients or take out shadows, but it's good for just kind of spot removal, like any kind of sunspots. It wouldn't be great for like tracing out a hair on this tool. I would use the healing brush for that, but the spot is good for just like what it's called, spot healing brush. So you can go in and click. She has a mole here, and I noticed that she covered it up with foundation, so I'm just going to go ahead and remove it. You could like change it to half opacity. Like sometimes I'll fade that, and I'll bring up the fade tool. Command Option F or Command Shift F brings up the fade tool, and it fades your last action. So I know a lot of people do these in layers and they don't want to mess with the original layer. I go quicker with this stuff, and I usually leave most of the things in one layer unless I'm going to do extensive retouching and I know that I might have to go backwards. I'll do that in layers and save the layers, but for a quick retouch where I know I'm just going to, open it, do a quick touch and save it as a JPEG, I'll just go in and do the action on the main layer and then maybe fade my last action. There's also the history brush that you can go back and select what part that you want to, what history you want to go back to, and then I can always change the opacity of the history brush and make adjustments that way. So I can go back in time still on the same base layer that I'm working on without using layers. So if I wanted to say that mole, we're looking at that mole there. I'll just enlarge a little bit closer. So we're looking at this mole right here, and this is like how it looked originally. This is after I took it out, and I'm actually going to cancel. I'm going to go back and do that again. It's a little bit bigger of a brush. It's a little better. And then if I wanted to, like say I wanted the mole showing so it didn't look like I retouched it out, but I just wanted to soften the effect of it so it didn't stand out in the image, that might be safe. Like say you didn't have approval from your client to delete a mole, but you weren't sure, but it was distracting to you and you wanted to kind of, soften it, you could do that. Just do the spot brush and then drag the fade for your last action down a bit, and that solves that. I will use the healing brush to kind of go over lines in the face, like take out little wrinkles or, laughing lines. It's also great for like say this little, this kind of stuff doesn't bother me, like the shadows under the eyes, but some people are like, I look tired, like, and I know a lot of women will use makeup to lighten the shadows under their eyes. Even men, I'll see like YouTubers like Can't Condo, like there's YouTubers that I could tell were wearing foundation and makeup. It was they were taking care of themselves because they're on video. But this tool works great for that. So like I'm gonna pick an area that has similar texture to the skin and kind of a brighter density. So I might just pick this area right here and then just see what that looks like. And it kind of blends and takes that away. but I'm noticing I'm adding too many pores there. So I'm going to pick like a softer area like up here with fewer pores and use that to blend. And then again, I can soften that with the fade tool, Command Shift Fade, and just kind of soften it a little bit just so it blends a little bit more. And yeah, I can go through quickly and just kind of mess around with like, I can take out crow's feet. You got to pick an area that kind of matches and then it blends nicely. But here I am just kind of like taking care of these little lines for her. And again, only if you get permission. I wouldn't mess with too much unless you have permission, because they can come back and be like, hey, why did you do that? Like, I earned those crow's feet. Like, what the heck are you doing? So better to play safe than sorry. But I don't know too many women that would be opposed to this. That would be like, what? You made me look 4 years younger. Like, I don't know too many women. So I know there's lots of people out there that would be like disgusted by this, but I'm going to try not to be listening to their voices right now. Yeah, so again, I don't get too crazy, but anything that kind of stands out on a normal size, you can get in pixel peeping, and this is at 100% right now. I usually don't go too far past 100%, sometimes 200%. This is at 300. This is 200%. So this is 100%. This is 200%. And that's 300%. I usually don't go too far past 200%. Usually it's at 100 is where I look at it. And if nothing really stands out or is distracting to me, I'm satisfied there. There's some hairs like, oh, I remember there's something over here. I already took that out. There's a distraction there. This thing right here, and again, I'll go back to full screen, like this kind of like root from a tree is a little distracting. This little part behind her hair is a little distracting. That's going to be a bit of more of a challenge. Even just this line in the background, how it's sloping down, it makes me feel like she's straight, but then that line in the background is a little distracting. So I might actually, even this little spot in the grass, I might just go in and kind of fix some of these things quickly. The spot brush, I'll fix this little thing on the grass quickly. I noticed that this tool works well up against an edge. It won't like blend in the edge with it. So you can be right next to an edge. You can even click right on an edge and it'll recreate the edge. Sometimes it messes up, but usually you can kind of mess with it and get it looking pretty true. I'm gonna go into here and just try to click this whole thing out at once, see what it does. Sometimes it'll pull in, see, it pulled in weird stuff here from the dress. So I'll go back over to the healing brush and I'm just gonna select like some grass on the left side of the image and pull it over here to the right and just kind of get it to a manageable size. And then I noticed it kind of blurred down in the bottom, so I'm going to redo that, make the brush a little smaller. Sometimes, you know, you can use the replace tool, but I noticed making the brush smaller sometimes helps. And then I think that helped a lot. And again, no one's really looking down here, they're looking at her face, so I'm not going to get crazy with it, but you don't want too much evidence of showing that. Like, you can tell where I did it right there, but for time's sake, I'm going to move on. And then what else? Oh, I said I was going to maybe mess with this area here. I might just come up here and select that area and just kind of blend this a little bit better, just to remove that harder line there so your eyes don't go there. And then this dead spot of grass behind her hair, this is more of a challenge, but I keep the brush somewhat small. I'm just using the healing brush, getting it around it. I could even just burn this in. I could use a burn tool and just darken this a bit, just so it's like the same brightness. And then I could use a color tool. I'll use a paintbrush tool and put the mode to color, and I could option click the grass area and I could paint in that color. And that's a pretty safe way of, you know, not having to mess with the hair too much. And I could fade that just like I faded the other stuff, just to make it blend a little bit. And as long as it's not like, when I blur my vision, if it's not standing out right here to me, I'm happy. And I'll crop out this sky right here. I'll crop out, oh, I might actually spot tool out this guy. Spot tool is good for keeping texture, so I can just try that, see if it works. Nope, Didn't work. So I'm gonna go back to the healing brush. Healing brush just blends things nicely. It doesn't create texture that doesn't need to be there. So, oops, ran off the page. So again, there, quick and easy. I might even just do this just in case I don't crop this far. Just take out that top part. I got a feeling I'll crop that. I'm gonna, oh, one thing I like to do with the eyes. I like showing people this. I learned this from somebody. Ooh, I saw something on her leather shirt here. I'm gonna take out real quick. There. So this is something I learned from a photographer. I can't remember her name. It's been like 20 years or something. But if you want to make someone's eyes pop, a trick to it, and she told me not to share this with anyone, but here I am sharing it with the world. So hopefully she's no longer in the business, and she probably is. So the burn tool, and I go up to burn shadows. So I use the burn tool here, and I set the setting to shadows. And what I'm going to do, especially people with blue eyes or light eyes, you can do this really easily. I'm just going to go in and trace the colored area of her eye, and I'm just tracing the dark black circle right here to darken it up. I'm just burning that in, and you don't have to be super careful because you're just selected shadows, so it's just burning the shadows. So I just made that exaggerated. See the difference between her eyes? And I'm going to do it over here too. Just going to kind of exaggerate that dark line. This makes the eyes pop, and honestly, like when you know it's done, you kind of think it looks a little awkward, but when you don't know it's done, you're like, dang, her eyes just pop. Like, what is going on? So it's a little trick. And then you could flip this around and use the dodge tool and dodge highlights, and you can pull out the highlights in her eye too that make her eyes just look like they're glowing. And since she has blue eyes, it kind of works, because when the sun hits her eyes, this happens anyways. The highlights stand out. So I'm going to do that. And then one last thing that I'll do sometimes is I'll sharpen them. Even though, like, man, with Sony's eye autofocus, it's ridiculously sharp. Like, this is 100%, and there's really no need for sharpening. But the sharpening, if you take the lasso tool and just kind of select, again, the colored part of her eye, I did a sloppy job with that, but I'm going to hit shift and select this one just to do them both at the same time. And I would take a little more time doing this, but for time's sake, I'm going to, and you can always hit option and delete out if you wanted to clean it up a little bit, just delete out that area. But I'm going to go up to filter, sharpen and unsharp mask, and then with this tool, yeah, like radius of 0.6 usually, and then depending on how much you want. For her eyes, it doesn't need much because the image is already sharp on her eyes. But this is a great tool if you say miss the focus on someone's eyes and you really love the image. You can use this technique to do that as well. You can also, like before I even do that, I could say go up to the select and modify it, and I could feather the edges of this selection tool. That way you don't see like a hard line of where it's been sharpened. So feather radius, I'm going to take a guess at like 20 pixels, and that might be too much. I'm going to feather that like 15 pixels. Whoops. Select, modify, feather, which is command or shift F6. I didn't even know that, but 15. You see it kind of turn into circles. Now I can go in and filter, sharpen, unsharp mask, and I can sharpen that even more. And all that does, I'm going to deselect there. All that does is gives it a little pop. Like here's before and after. You see how her eyes just pop more before and then after. So they just look extra sharp. A little trick if you miss focus on the eyes. But now her eyes, I'll show you before and after of this too. Maybe I'll go, let's see, before the burn tool here. Boom. So there's before and after. And it looks a little weird. I'll be honest, like seeing that dark circle looks a little weird because you just saw me do it. You can always like undo some of it. Like I could say, okay, that's too much. I'm going to undo some of that. Or this would be a good time to work in layers if you want to, you know, fine tune that later. But I just remember this girl showed me her work, and especially printed. I was like, what the heck? Are you shooting like large format cameras? Like this is back in the film days. Like how are you getting the eyes looking like that? And she's like, it's a little trick in Photoshop. And I always get compliments on how the eyes look after I do this. So I'm gonna dodge. Oh, that's a burn tool. I'm gonna dodge your eyes a little more here on the highlights. And you could even go to midtones if you want the blue to kind of pop a little more. Um, just kind of dodge a little bit, but I think that more softens it, and dodging the highlights makes them kind of really pop, makes them look like extra special, like glowing emeralds. Yeah. Anyway, so since this shot's about her eyes, I spent more time in her eyes, um, and I think like if you trust me on this, if you look at this without knowing what I did, you would have been like, dang, her eyes pop, you know. So there's kind of before and after, and I'll show you the whole image. Before, after. And then like I'm noticing her hand looks a little dark down here. So I'm gonna go in with just the dodge tool and dodge maybe midtones. And I'm just gonna brighten up this area a little bit before I take it back into capture one.
Mike, do you ever let
How
images
does that look?
sit for hours, days, weeks, and then revisit them just to make sure that like you might go back to an image and see like what was I seeing or what was I looking at? This is
Yeah.
way off.
100%. Yeah. Usually in the morning, I go back and look at an image and I'm like, this is all wrong. Like everything's wrong. Like, let's start from scratch, you know?
Why
So
is it
yeah, it's,
blue?
yeah, what the heck? Like, what was I doing last night? Like, what light was on in my room that messed up my eyes? But yeah, all the time. That happens all the time. And sometimes I get it into like fully uploaded to the gallery, presenting to the client, and before I hit send to the client, I'm like, let me look at that one more time, and I look at it on
Mm,
my iPad or my iPhone, and everything's wrong. I'm like, what the heck? Like, why can't the color work? But yeah, there's a lot of factors, a lot of variables involved, and so it's good to just double check. And then sometimes you could even give a little disclaimer when you send it to your client, just be like, hey, just so you know, the color is kind of calibrated to my monitor. You might be seeing something slightly different. So if you want anything else, or you feel like the color's a little different. And I've had clients come back to me, especially like wedding fashion clients come back to me and be like, hey, the gowns don't look their true color. Like we need it warmer, or it looks too cold, and then I can go in and kind of adjust based on what they're seeing and do an adjustment, kind of a universal batch correction on the images to get it closer. There's lots of, like going back and sometimes, and unfortunately, and redoing things. Yeah. But
mhm.
what about
Yeah,
you?
'cause
You do that too?
no,
I gotta
totally.
be,
Well, and
it's
it's just
not, I'm
like,
not alone in that.
no, you're not alone. I do it all because I edit a lot of times late at night, and I'm like, okay, maybe it's not smart to edit at 2 o'clock in the morning. You wake up and you don't know what your light is looking. I'll edit. I was laughing when you were talking about the daylight balancing lights and everything because it's like, man, I'll have like a full red LED setup behind me just because it makes me feel better when I'm editing, but it's probably
Right.
not
Oh
great for
yeah.
what I'm seeing. But no, it
Yeah.
jumped out to me when 2 points when you discuss the burning around the edge of the iris, and also when you
Uh-huh.
pointed out the hand there. I think it's two great points that you brought up is a lot of times when we edit images, we we know that it's there, we know that there's a change, and we look at it differently than if somebody just looks at the image.
Right.
Where I think we kind of see it more drastically. And then on the hand, now that you mentioned, yeah, the hand's a little dark, then I never would have thought of it. But yeah, when you start to compare it to the other hand in the
Yeah, like
face.
now it looks contrasty to me. I don't
Hmm.
even know where the uncontrast tool is. You know where that is? I don't know where that is. I would have to almost go back and fix that and capture one and import it, or I can
I
dodge
do.
shadows maybe.
You do a much cleaner. I do. I'm like five different layers just for adjustments, and I'm
Oh
masking. I
yeah,
do a lot of masking.
that's cool. Yeah. Well, like I guess I feel like since I have to deliver usually to a client. I have to deliver a
Hmm.
batch of like 1 in 5 images. So if I shoot 1,000 images, I got to give them 200 images or something. If
Hmm.
I shoot 5,000 images at a wedding, I got to give them 800 images. That's usually, and just for time's sake too, just to like get it shipped and not make them wait forever for their photos. I give them a lot of images. So I'm like, if I'm going to do this, it might be just on 1 or 2 images, and I got to kind of, cut my losses and get that thing just published on Instagram or whatever I'm
Hmm.
editing it for. But I'm always worried. Yeah, I'm always like, man, if people see that, or like, dang it,
I
like
know.
I should have done more.
Yeah, totally.
But Yeah, layers. I'd actually like to watch you do layers. I think I don't work in layers enough, just mainly because I'm always in a hurry. But I know that layers are always recommended when you're working on an image because you sometimes you want to go back just one step or one, like
Yeah.
I
Or
just take a
paint
lot of the
something back in.
screenshots. Right. Oh yeah,
Mhm.
for sure. Yeah, and work on a specific layer, or say you just overdid the retouching or something on the skin and you wanted to soften that, you can just change the opacity of that layer, right?
Yeah.
Versus having to go back and undo things or use a history brush and try to like not hit other things that you've adjusted in the image.
Oh, totally. Well, that's the beauty, I guess, of Photoshop is there's a million different ways to do a million different things,
Yeah.
and everybody has their own process, and you do what works for you. It may not be the fastest process, or you might take something that is way more steps, but it's like it's native to you, so it works for you.
Hmm. Yeah. I notice also like the veins on her hand. Like a lot of women don't like veins on their hands, so I
Mm.
would probably go in and adjust that as well. There's always something, and then some things no one will ever notice, and only you notice, and you're wasting your time. But um, yeah, you know how it is.
Totally. No, totally. I mean, and this helps to kind of see. I like when people can just edit. You watch, you pick up little nuances, you pick up, little things that they might do. I thought I was the only person that does the fade tool, that uses the fade tool
Oh
like
yeah,
that. Oh, I
yeah,
live and die by that. I'm like, I love
yeah,
going in and it's like, and just back and forth, 100% to
yeah,
0%, kind of find your way right in
yeah.
the middle.
Yeah,
But
it's great. It's great. Just like the last thing you did, just to kind of soften it and to fade it, because it's usually too much. Usually, what I'm doing is too much,
mhm,
and it's good to keep it natural. I want my work to look natural. Like I feel like you can make an image look perfect, and in a way, it almost makes it less believable. Like
mhm,
if you overdo the perfection in it, and if you leave some blemishes, you leave some wrinkles, you leave whatever in the image. Now that's raw, and people don't think that that was too manipulated in post, and it's a more
yeah.
believable in a way. And you just got to appreciate life for what it is. It's not perfect.
No, totally. And I think that's where, I don't know, for some people it's what they love about portraits. For me, that's what I always hated about portraits and what kind of pushed me away from. That's why I started shooting more architecture and inanimate objects, because
Yeah.
they don't they don't talk back, and they don't tell you, well, can you clear this up, can you smooth this out, or it's always something
Yeah.
weird. It's like, my elbow looks weird, can you lighten the skin on my elbow? And it's like some strange request, and you're
They
just
see
like,
like you show them the back of your camera and you're like, look at this amazing shot of you. You look so beautiful. And they're like thinking all they see is the flaw. Their eye goes right to
yeah,
the one flaw, the one thing they're self-conscious about. And it's just true for all of us. Like we all see our flaws. And everyone else doesn't see that. Everyone else sees like your beauty and they're probably jealous. And then you're just looking at the flaws.
totally.
But I feel like when I'm on a shoot, if I ever show an image, it's because I'm trying to build the confidence, like the momentum of confidence in the model, because I want them to feel like super confident and
Hmm.
super like beautiful in front of my camera, because that's what's going to make great images. And so if I ever show them an image, and then they like see the flaw in it, I'm like, oh crap, hey, I need to start paying attention to these things, and maybe not show them that part of the image, or zoom in a little or something, or zoom out a lot so they can't see that, and be careful of what I show them, because I don't want them seeing it and then losing trust in me and being like, oh, this photographer's shooting all the wrong parts of me.
They're in their
So
head the rest of the shoot wondering what they look like.
yeah, yeah.
I guess it,
Yeah, we're like their mirror, right? A photographer
yeah.
is the model's mirror. So what they see on our face, and then what we show them on our camera, is how they perceive themselves, at that moment,
Mhm.
and their confidence could be high or low based on that. So
Yeah, it's
it's
interesting.
sensitive.
Where when you think about it, it's like we can never see ourselves. Like every time we've ever seen ourselves is either a reflection or a photo. Like we don't see
Right.
what we actually look like. So
It's actually
everything you're
backwards
looking
too,
at,
right? It's like
yeah,
flipped from what other people see too.
yeah. So it's like it's interesting. It's an interesting dynamic with how we see ourselves and what images we see that we like of ourselves, and certain things that other people see no issue with that we see an issue with. It's like
Hmm.
what makes portraiture so interesting is it's not just about what's there, it's about what's perceived to be there.
Yeah, it's so true. Yeah, and like Chris and I were shooting portraits of each other out in the field, and we were kind of talking out loud about like what we do and how we feel in front of the camera versus behind the camera. And I'm always self-conscious in front of a camera. Someone turns a camera on me and I instantly think about my crooked teeth. I think about like all the different my baldness and things like that. And I'm always thinking about these things. And like, so when I'm shooting, I'm kind of probably using the things I'm self-conscious about and trying to protect the other people from feeling that way.
Interesting.
And so sometimes I might project like how I feel about myself in front of a camera on someone else, and they have no issue with it, and I'm bringing up stuff that they didn't even know, you know. And then other times I'm like, I think it works for me because, or works for them because I'm like, you know, trying to shoot in a way that doesn't make them self-conscious, I guess. Like I shoot fast, and Chris noticed this. He said, like, Mike, a lot of times you shoot with your face away from the camera, like looking at the monitor. Because I never do that. Why do you do that? And I find myself like out here and shooting all different angles and stuff, but I find it a little bit less intimidating than here. With my eye looking through a telephoto lens at the model, they feel like I'm closer up and I could be seeing things that they're self-conscious about, like crow's feet or things like that. And so I tend to bring the camera away because then they know I'm just looking at this little screen, and is like I feel like it just is less intrusive for them, and then it feels also more like the iPhone, and they're used to being in front of iPhones and stuff. So I found myself using that monitor a lot and just kind of like, you know, shooting fast and laughing with them and looking them in the eyes eye to eye versus looking through my camera at them and using the camera as like a shield between me and them. I try to make that connection without the camera between us. And I don't know if it works or not, but I feel like I like it when people just shoot quick and make me laugh and talk to me and make personal connection versus like just stare at me through their camera. I'm just like, ooh, what do I look like? You know? So
It's interesting. I can only imagine how many gems were dropped. You and Orvig out there in the out in the wild in Idaho, just
that guy's
sharing
awesome. I love that
sharing
guy.
knowledge. Yeah, I mean, it's always he's always great vibes, and you're obviously always great vibes. And I think you guys have such a cerebral approach to the work, which not a lot of people tap into. And I think it shows in the images where there's something more. It evokes more emotion when you like this image here. It doesn't give me Sony Kondo vibes of 30 photographers over your shoulder. It gives me you and the model.
Cool.
And I think that's
Awesome.
what's important is really getting that connection.
Yeah, yeah. You can always find little moments like that, and like even in a super distracting area, you can kind of like, you know, so that's the beauty of a camera, right? You can pick a lens and kind of isolate somebody and make it look like that's like that Instagram thing, like Instagram versus reality. You know, it's like if you were to, I was like, I need to make a reel with Instagram versus reality right here in this spot because that's what it was.
Totally. Well, Mike, this was awesome, man. It's probably the easiest you ever get to do of any workshop where you just get to sit there and edit a couple pictures and you just get to
Yeah, for
watch.
sure,
But
for sure.
nah, thank you
Yeah,
for
super
letting
chill.
us in on your process. I mean, it's pretty cut and dry, and I think that's ultimately the beauty of it is that you shouldn't have to sit there. And a lot of what we adjust in post processing is just minutia. It's little distractions. It's not major
Yeah.
things, and you shouldn't really have to make a ton of overt corrections. It really should just be like another Sony artisan says. Scott Robert Lim calls it massaging the image,
Yeah,
which I've always
yeah,
liked that
for
term.
sure. Yeah, and I'm looking at this image and I could do a lot more, but you know, we don't have time. But like, I think like, yeah, keeping it somewhat natural is never a problem. You know,
Hmm.
keeping it raw, so it's believable. So
Totally. Totally. Well, Mike, always great having you on, man. It's
likewise, bro. Thanks for having me, dude. It's always
of
fun hanging out
course,
with
of
you.
course. It's always good. This time, we didn't have to chat. We didn't have to keep the conversation going. It was just a laid back session. It's always a time for those. So huge thank you again to Mike, to Sony, obviously, for sponsoring this event, and to all of our viewers who are out there who quietly tuned in today. But that's it. We're gonna let Mike get back to it over there on the West Coast, and we're gonna get back to what we do. We got the thumbs up rolling in from the viewers, but that is it. Another rendition of the B&H virtual event space is in the books. We'll catch y'all next time.
Thanks, Derek.
Thanks, Mike.